Based on Sojourner Truth's arguments for the rights of African Americans and women in Ain't I a Woman, what is the central idea of the speech? In this lesson, you will learn how to determine the central idea of a text by identifying relationships between supporting ideas. We have been reading the informative text Ain't I a Woman, a speech given by Sojourner Truth in 1851 at a women's convention in Akron, Ohio. There are three things I would like you to keep in mind as we do the lesson today. First, making meaning of informational text requires close reading. Close reading involves searching for relationships between ideas. And central ideas are developed over the course of an entire text. As we look at the text of Sojourner Truth's speech to determine the central idea of her message, we will use three steps. Reread to identify the topic of the speech. Ask yourself, what supporting ideas does the author use to develop a position on the topic? Make notes to capture your thinking. Ask yourself, what is the central idea which connects all the ideas presented by the author? Our question is, based on Sojourner Truth's arguments for the rights of African Americans and women in Ain't I a Woman, what is the central idea of the speech? I know that I can connect bits of information across an entire text to determine the author's central idea. Paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 have ideas that I will think about and connect in order to answer the question. Let's begin with step 1, reread to identify the topic of the speech. When I look back at the first paragraph of the speech, I notice this part right here. Truth says, I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. Sojourner Truth is saying there is a disagreement about people's rights. Sounds like the Negroes of the South and the women at the North are all on one side against the white men. I get it. I think the topic of this speech is human rights. Now that I know the topic, I am ready for step 2. Ask yourself, what supporting ideas does the author use to develop a position on the topic? Make notes to capture your thinking. In paragraph 2, Truth talks about a man's claim that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Truth counters the man's claim by stating emphatically that no one ever does these things for her. I can connect the ideas here in paragraph 2 back to the idea of human rights and make a note about what I notice. It sounds like Truth is saying the standard for African American females is not the same as the one for white females. As I read further in paragraph 2, I notice some other things that are important. Sojourner Truth describes just how different her life is from the life of white females. She describes her experiences as a former slave, how she worked in the fields with male slaves, and how she was beaten with a whip. I see how a couple of ideas here connect back with things I've already read and the topic of human rights. By describing her life experiences, Truth shows that women are strong and do not need the help of men. She also brings up an issue about human rights by revealing the unjust and cruel treatment of all African American slaves. Reading on in paragraph 3, I notice something else important. Truth uses this metaphor about intelligence. She says, what's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? I had to think about this, but now I understand that when she's talking about intellect, she's trying to say it doesn't matter if someone is twice as smart as someone else. Truth is saying intelligence should not be a factor in determining who is entitled to suffrage rights. It is wrong to exclude someone because he or she is not as smart as others. I think I'm ready now for step 3. Ask yourself, what is the central idea which connects all the ideas presented by the author? Well, I figured out that the topic is human rights. Truth made the point that the standard of treatment is different for African American females and white females. She gives evidence that women are as strong as men and don't need the help of men. She also gives evidence that the treatment of African American slaves is unjust and cruel. And finally, she says that intelligence should not be a factor in who has suffrage rights. I'm thinking, seems to me this all connects around the ideas of gender, race, and suffrage rights. My question was, based on Sojourner Truth's arguments for the rights of African Americans and women in Ain't I a Woman, what is the central idea of the speech? Here is my answer. The central idea of Sojourner Truth's speech is that equality is not based on gender, race, or intellect. All men and women are equal and should have the right to vote. Here are the steps we used in our lesson today. Reread to identify the topic of the speech. Ask yourself, what supporting ideas does the author use to develop a position on the topic? Make notes to capture your thinking. Ask yourself, what is the central idea which connects all the ideas presented by the author? In this lesson, you have learned how to determine the central idea of a text by identifying relationships between supporting ideas.